There we go. Hi. Well, thank you for being here and supporting Dave. It's certainly been a labor of love for him. He has been trying to do a lot on his own, so just give him a round of applause for that. Inaugural event here. And we're hoping that each year it's bigger, better, and getting more support out here, right? So we will just start off with our panelists. Dave hand-selected these people because he figured that everybody would have their unique perspective when talking about how to reduce recidivism, or at the very least, just personal life experiences that can really lend to some of these stories here. So we are going to start off with Jerry Rain Harden. Come on up as I'm reading your bio here. Jerry Rain Harden is the true definition of second chances. Harden spent 33 months in federal prison. Harden is a native of Indiana who planted her feet in Texas, Houston, Texas. And more than 20 years ago, her career began in the oil and gas industry, where she was promoted to operations compliance analyst, and then even spent some time in real estate prior to incarceration. While incarcerated, Harden used her entrepreneurial skills to create the Quick Start program to assist women re-entering society. Quick Start program is now on Amazon and iTunes, as well as part of the curriculum at Bryan Federal Prison. In addition, Harden created her own business, HTX Web Cafe, that provides web services to businesses across the country. Of course, you can hear more about her today and after. She has a lot of cool cards. We have Chief Sharon Arnold. Sharon started her law enforcement career in 1992 and has progressively elevated in rank to her current position of Assistant Chief with Fort Bend Constable Precinct 2. She holds a Master Peace Officer license, a Civil Proficiency Certification, Texas Commission on Law Enforcement Instructor Certification, Alternative Dispute Resolution Mediator Certification, and is a Crisis Intervention Trainer. Chief Arnold is an active member of Justice of the Peace Constable Association. Chief Arnold is the recipient of a number of awards and recognition for her community involvement, and she has a lifetime commitment to God, children, and the elderly. Chief Arnold. Dr. Angel. Dr. Angel always loved caring for patients, but felt conflicted about the business model of medicine. Desiring to maintain a practice that values people and quality care above money, she has since found her purpose. Dr. Angel merged her passion into her career and started Ujima Challenge. Ujima Challenge empowers the Black community to improve our health and quality of life through education, directive actions through online challenges, and valuable resources. Dr. Angel is now fulfilling her purpose by using both her creativity and education to present a fun and engaging method to effectively bring change. Reggie OG1 Gordon. He's a powerful force throughout the Houston community, the original creator of the infamous Scared Straight prison program. In Operation Outreach, OG1 uses educational methods as opposed to scare tactics to empower the youth at risk. By disallowing fear to make decisions for these minors, the program subsequently enables a child to escape the pitfalls of adolescence. The youth who participate with OG1 will develop skills to constructively cope with fear and make habit-forming decisions, paving the way to a brighter future. Chris Darkins. As a disciplined and talented individual, Chris Darkins has, I didn't write the bio, if anybody's shuffling, has represented his culture as a member of various high school, collegiate, and professional sports teams. In 1996 and 1997, he was a member of the Green Bay Packers Super Bowl and NFC Championship teams, respectively. He has years of executive level experience in Euro-American banking, finance, insurance, and technology markets. He has received numerous leadership awards throughout his life and has been inducted into his High School and Collegiate Sports Hall of Fame, and in 2018 received a certificate of congressional recognition for being wrongfully accused of a crime that led to his incarceration for 7 months before being judicially vindicated. Shakira? Okay. First time meeting her, I wasn't sure what Shakira Dennis, you can come on up. Shakira Dennis is a community leader and one of the panelists, of course. She is a graduate of the Houston Black Leadership Institute and the prestigious Women's Campaign School at Yale. She also served in the Obama administration as an intern. Currently, Shakira serves as the Community Outreach Coordinator on DA Kim Ogg's team. She is also an Ignite Texas facilitator, in which she teaches young women the importance of civic engagement and political empowerment at KIPP Sunnyside and KIPP Houston. In addition, she recently served as the Deputy Political Director for the Sylvester Turner for Mayoral campaign. Her passion is empowering her community through civic participation. Yeah, that'll work. So I'd like to start off, well, I don't want to block Rain.
You good.
So. I would like to start off with Rain though, so I might have to stand up again. For both you and OG1, I want to talk about what it was like for you once you got out, and how have you been able to stay out of the system and keep from getting back in, like obviously we're trying to avoid doing.
Right. Well, I don't want to sit here and pretend like it was super easy. It was extremely hard, and I had a massive support system, and it was extremely hard for me. Couldn't find a job. Well, first of all, let me back up and say that going into the halfway house was so difficult because the rules and laws and was completely different for women versus men. So that was very hard to do. Then going on home confinement, the little petty things that they do to send you back, the threats to send you back, was such a stress factor in my life. And so I had to dig deep. I kept trying to find jobs, nobody would hire me. I've been in IT for 20 years, so I said, you know what, let me find something that I've done and turn that into a business. And really by the grace of God, and I can't sit here and take all the credit because there were people in this room that hired me and said, hey, come work for me. You know, come and do this for me. And over time, the business just grew and grew and grew. I just continue to hold my business with integrity and try to build confidence that I'm going to get the job done. And every single day, customers come, and I haven't even had to market. This is the first time I even had to market my business. Mm-hmm. But it was very, very hard. There are no resources. The resources that are out there, they're so, they're vague. If I go to the job fairs, it was plumbing, or it was welding, or it was, waitressing, which I would drop a tray on anybody. I'm not able to do that. But there wasn't any like business type jobs or technical jobs. I'll go to the booths and they're like, no. So I was frustrated, but at the same time, I did have a support system to help.
And you think that part was key?
Absolutely.
Don't you, Wayne?
Well, the key to anybody surviving once they're released from that institution is family support. I went in when I was 16 years old. And after 16, I served 20 years and 9 months in that system. Even after doing 20 years and 9 months in that system, coming back to a society to where people look at you but they don't see you, especially black men. And the struggles that you go through, dealing with the trauma, the depression of coming out of an institution that's totally designed to destroy you as a male. Me specifically, by me starting this program in '79, I was always connected with the outside world by starting the Scared Straight program. So I was sort of had a different outlook when I got out of prison because I had made many connections while I was there with many different connections that was gonna work with me once I was released. But I'm just, for me specifically, working with other young men to get out that institution that don't have that specific, what she said, support system once you get out. Because we must look at it, 80% of the brothers that go in there with no education, can't read and write, so they come back out into a world that's 3-4 years advanced, or 4 or 5 years advanced when they get out. They're even more mentally frustrated once they get out. And the sad thing about it, the biggest enemy that we have once we come back in the neighborhood is our own community. Mm-hmm. Because our community look at us like, black men, what did you do? And the people that's supposed to be there to support you, you can't go to them because they got this type of chip on their shoulder. And when you get that feeling, and I tell people all the time, as dealing from a black man's point of view, we're gifted from God to know intuition when people love us. You don't have to say that. We can feel when you don't love us. So going through those stresses and frustrations to try to fight your way back into a system to be accepted by those that's pretending to love you but don't love you. And I tell people this all the time. Black men don't care how much you know until we know how much you care. So that was one of the most difficult things. Even still today, I've been out 23 years. And the struggle still comes in the mighty work that I've been doing for 30 years in the community. And trying to work with young men to give them the insight to know that you can survive. Hope is there for you. But you have to figure out a way to maneuver your ways through this community that's there to love you and guide you and show you a different direction and deal with the issues that we're afraid to deal with and talk about in our community. Because I'm going to say this here, black men are not allowed to claim mental illness such as depression. Gangsters can't claim to say I'm depressed. The word depression from the minds of our community, from a black man's point of view, you're just lazy. You don't want to do nothing. So when we deal with depression and sadness, it's much easier for black men to deal with anger and madness. Because that's the only understanding that from our community feel like they can deal with us.
OG1 hitting all the topics, right? Good question. Chris, I also want to ask you, what was it like for you, even being wrongfully convicted? You were still getting out, still having to essentially kind of hit a restart button.
You know, yeah, once you've been charged with a crime, you know, people essentially come to their conclusions about you. There's a very few people in your circle that will stand by you regardless of the situation. My mother was one of them. My father, my brother, my son, my daughter, they were all in my corner. But you know, dealing with the backlash associated, especially being kind of in the Euro-American professional world, dealing with that backlash was extremely difficult.
And how were you able to kind of move forward with that? Do you think community was kind of a big piece?
Well, I didn't so much concern myself with it, because I was, at that point in time, I'd already kind of washed my hands with Euro-American financial markets, Euro-American business, so I kind of looked at it as kind of a badge of respect to say that, look, I'm not fully assimilated by the system, obviously, based on the fact that I was charged. Now, the one thing that I will say is that, you know, the biggest issue, which is kind of what benefited me, is that I understood the legal process, right? And with any criminal situation, it's when you get put into the system, it's the entry, right? It's the indictment that is the instrument that gets you into trouble. So at some point, I'd like to ask the judge a question in regards to how she plans on, you know, addressing what we see, because my organization, we spend a lot of time in the courtrooms, and we see very loosely pleaded indictments that are getting people into a lot of trouble, having them sit in jail for months and months on end, and then ultimately having to take a plea deal.
Yeah.
Okay, first of all, to answer your question, when it comes to the indictment, you know, that is a grand jury process. It's a process that could be made better because the defense attorney cannot be in there when evidence is being introduced in that process. So it's really kind of a one-sided process. But when it comes to judges and the indictments, it's really up to the attorney. It's really up to the defense attorney to bring up the fact that there's a problem with this indictment. It's not supported by facts and things like that. That's what the court process is about. It's the defense attorney. So as a judge, I can't really step into the defense attorney. I have to stay in the judge's role, and so it's difficult. I can't get there. But if I see something that is blatant, of course, I can ask the prosecution and defense to come up to the bench, and I can discuss whatever I see with them, along with them, but that role is for the defense attorney to say, look, there's something wrong with this indictment, and, you know, it's not supported by facts, and hence that's where the trouble starts, because then there's either a trial or there's a plea or there's a dismissal. So that's where the trouble starts, when you have this indictment that's not supported by the facts, and then a person has to make a choice, and that's a really difficult choice. Do I try this and roll the dice? And that's the problem that we have with, another problem with our jury system. A lot of people are pleading because they're scared to death of the jury system. So even though it's a bad indictment, some people don't want to fight it, they don't want to challenge it. You know, they may not have the money to fight it, and then they're afraid to. But from the judge's perspective, it's something that you can discuss with the prosecution and the defense. I mean, if it's really egregious, but that's, you got to have your attorney in there fighting those type of things. So you got to pick the attorneys that's going to fight them.
Did you have a follow-up?
Did I answer your question or something else?
I do have a follow, but I think
Okay.
it might derail the conversation too far, so I'll wait
Okay.
till.
Well, I'll only be here for a little while longer, so for about 20 minutes longer, 20 minutes longer, so you.
I think that, I don't know a whole lot about the political system and the politics, but in my situation, I went through 3 or 4 attorneys. And one in particular did not even have, I believe you have to have a license to
You must.
but, well, didn't even have it. So some of these attorneys that are out there are getting in our cases knowing they're gonna do a plea. We don't know anything about a plea. We're already scared. We're not even thinking about, we think about how, 40 years, maybe, 30? So something has to happen there, because they're coming in, they get your money, I paid money, and then the night before I went to turn myself in, the attorney called and said, I'm not gonna show up, bring me $10,000 more. Then I found out later, after I'm in the system, that she didn't even have a license to represent me anyway.
I agree. That is something that is happening. We do have a state bar grievance committee that clients can take up issues that they're having with attorneys. The problem with the state bar is, you know, they're gonna take major issues like something that you just talked about. It's, you know, they're not going to be accepting calls. You know, I called my attorney yesterday and he didn't call me back. You know, they're not gonna, but egregious things like you brought up, in fact, it is against the law to try and practice law without a license. But as far as the criminal justice reform is part of what Kim Odd's office, and she can speak to that, is trying to do. But you have to really do your due diligence when you're picking your attorneys. And I will tell you, I had a case in my family where the lawyer at first was rah, we're gonna try this case. And then all of a sudden, you know, my cousin called and she was like, the lawyer wants me to come in the office this Sunday, you know, could you go with me? And I already knew that was the plea talk. I mean, before we even got there, I already knew we had a trial setting was set, and I already knew this Sunday was gonna be the plea talk. So I went. And sure enough, it was a plea talk, you know, and you don't want to take the chance of spending all these years in prison. So, you know, and I understand the difference is I was able to go and tell her mother, what you need to do is you need to hire another attorney before that next court date. You need to get rid of him. And it was kind of the O.J. Simpson thing where he had an attorney was trying to plead him, but it costs money to go out and get rid of this attorney and go and hire another one. And in my family, I have encouraged someone to go to the state bar. They were able to get some of their monies back because the attorney took the money and just didn't do the job, and they wound up having to hire another attorney. So, so the state bar is there in those instances, but that's part of Kim Ogg, and that's why she's trying to get some judges with like mind that agree with criminal justice reform, because we can do more when you have a like mind than you can when you have one party that's struggling for criminal justice reform and others are not. And judges can play a bigger role, and we can talk about the court appointment system. When you have judges that really care about the judges that they're appointing on cases, and they're careful to appoint ones that they know have a reputation for really fighting cases. And I'll tell anybody, if you hire an attorney and you see that that attorney is not doing what they're supposed to do, address it early, because sometimes you can go so far down the case until the judge is not gonna let that attorney out. So I'm really serious. When someone shows you who they are the first time, believe them, okay? If they're not doing what they're supposed to do, you need to move quickly, honestly. And if you have to bring it up to the judge, I'm not feeling this attorney, I need some time, I need to talk to some other attorneys, put it out there, but understand the signals. Like I said, when that Sunday thing came, I want to talk to you on a Sunday in my office, I knew that was a plea conversation. So, read the tea leaves when you're dealing with them.
And let's go ahead and pivot to Shakira to talk about what is going on. Yes, Shakira, that's you. Talk about what is going on in the DA's office right now.
So there are several things going on, and so again, my name is Shakira. I lead the Public Engagement Division at the Harris County District Attorney's Office under the leadership of District Attorney Kim Ogg. My assistant's here, Tiffany Valdez, who's also in the Public Engagement Division. And so there's several things going on since we took office, and most of them are policy oriented because that's what it takes to really make substantive changes in the criminal justice system. And I do agree with you, Cassandra, it takes a collective effort and collective influence to really move the needle. A few policies and programs that have come into place under District Attorney Ogg's administration is the misdemeanor marijuana diversion program. And I think we can all attest that there are so many black and brown kids and adults who are being put in jail behind low-level nonviolent offenses or victimless crimes per se. And so she instituted a policy last March to where anything under 4 ounces, you'll be diverted around the jail, meaning that you'll take a cognitive decision-making class and you'll pay a $150 fine, right? This is not applicable to anyone who's on probation or deferred adjudication or who's found in possession of marijuana in a school zone. And so a lot of the policies and practices that are taking place, the public, we've gone out of our way, right, to ensure that we engage the public on what this means for them. And also there's an indigency fund. If there's an individual who doesn't have the dollars, to pay for the program, we have an indigency fund and we'll pay for the program for you to participate to ensure that you walk away with no criminal record and you see no jail time. I think that's a great first step in the right direction, and we haven't had this type of activity in Harris County in over 20 years. So while that's one program, we also have the Clean and Green program, same thing. Anybody who's charged with a low-level nonviolent offense, misdemeanor on the misdemeanor level, instead we have a working MOU on the books with Buffalo Bayou Partnership, so it'll clean up green space versus, and I think it beats the hell out of a criminal record and any jail time. Our last program is the Make It Right program, which some of you may have heard of. We work in partnership with the JPs, Justice of the Peace Courts. It's a county-wide initiative, so if you have, again, low-level, nonviolent offense, misdemeanor level offense on your record, we lift the warrant, and then we dismiss the case on site. Individuals can also take advantage of a job fair, which is also on site, and also free legal resources. So if you have questions, there's attorneys from all types of backgrounds. Any questions you may have as it pertains to expunctions, non-disclosures, family law, immigration law, we reach out far and wide to make sure that we have a variety of folks there. And so I think that those three are a step in the right direction. DA Ogg was also, while she was not a party in the Bell suit that I'm sure many folks have been following, she did submit an amicus brief in support, well, I guess speaking out against the cash bail system. And so again, I think we have to think about the trifecta. I think the politics that are at play, unfortunately, the criminal justice system shouldn't be politicized, but it is, right? And so you have a Democratic, Sheriff Gonzalez, you have County Commissioner Rodney Ellis, you have District Attorney Ogg, and then you have some other folks who are in that spirit. And then for what it's worth, Police Chief Art Acevedo. And so they work in partnership, to institute these reforms, because it takes, again, a collective to move these things along. And I think that what we do daily is we go out into the community. I was late, and I know he was like, what are you doing? So we were at South Texas College of Law, 100 Black Men of the Houston Metropolitan Chapter was hosting their annual Keeping Our Boys Out of the Criminal Justice Pipeline. And so we were there with DA Ogg, and it's just a full course of teaching young men about the intricacies of the criminal justice system. What do you do when you're interacting with a police officer? What policies and practices are on the books? Teaching them at a very early age. And I think that type of proactive engagement goes a long way for our community stakeholders.
And Chief Arnold, look, and I want to make sure we get to everybody. I know we have limited time, so I want to make sure all of our panelists can at least answer one question. Chief Arnold, how do you feel, not even just that initial interaction with law enforcement, but A, how do you feel that, you know, our young people or older people can, you know, get out of these interactions safely, and then also, you know, potentially maybe even avoid whatever situation, but also, more importantly, how do you feel that law enforcement officers have a role or don't have a role in recidivism rates?
Law enforcement has a role. That initial contact that's made with individuals has to be that in a positive sense. And I try to educate drivers, especially African American men, that when you make contact with a police officer, be calm, be patient, listen, and do what you have to do. I cannot sit here and say that all police officers are right. I can only speak on my own experience. And I have made contact with young black men that were sitting on weapons, okay, that were in possession of things that they should not be in possession of. But my initial contact with them was that of respect, okay? Even though minutes later I find out that you're in a vehicle that's stolen, and again, you're in possession of a weapon that could take my life. So it's very difficult, but we cannot stop the next vehicle with that first vehicle or that first incident in our mind. Everyone has to have that fair opportunity and the fairness that each and every individual deserves. So with me, my thing is constantly to make certain that we're being fair as an officer to any individual that we stop on the street or we make contact with. And oftentimes we're immediately judged because we put on this uniform that we're a different kind of person, but we're not. We have families, and we have, in my case, I have African American men in my life that I'm constantly talking to and trying to educate on how to respond to any situation that they may come across. And has it become difficult? Yeah, 25 years ago, I probably wouldn't be sitting on this panel addressing situations with, you know, African American men or racial biases and things of that nature. But we've come to that time in our lives that we have to attest to what's in front of us. But I constantly say that we have to respect in each other. I'm going to respect you as a driver of a vehicle. All I need you to do is respect me as a police officer. And I think if we can meet that mutual grounds, then we will have a better understanding of the situation that's at hand.
And what about when somebody does encounter a law enforcement officer who isn't you, who doesn't have that mutual respect? Then how should somebody try to play that?
You know, each situation is different, and I can't say that everything is etched in stone. But again, I just ask that, you know, if you stop by a police officer, keep your hands where they're visible, answer the questions that are there with you, do the very best you can to protect yourself in a given situation.
And we certainly know that doesn't always go
No.
according to plan, as we would hope. Once again, I want to make sure everybody gets a question, so we're going to kind of bounce around. Going to Dr. Angel, earlier we were talking about how mental illness can certainly play a role in not even just when somebody ends up getting locked up, but even after the fact. Talk to me about some of what you have seen in just your work, and then also different programs that are kind of in place or trying to be in place to help out the mental illness component.
Okay. Well, I think when we think about mental illness and incarceration, we kind of, like everything else, have to go back to the roots and how this all came into play. And pretty much our country and a lot of other places were structured around financially putting, basically making money off of black people. So after slavery, we went into the incarceration route, obviously, to make money off of us. So we can look back even in the history of Texas and see that there were, I think, 261 people who were incarcerated the year after slavery ended, and 197 of them were black people. So that's 75% of the people that were incarcerated in Texas were black people. I'm pretty sure that we weren't committing 75% of the crime. So we were incarcerated so that people could make money off the clothing mill, and we could be their free labor to make that money. So that hasn't changed. That's all still the same objective. So today, when people go into prison, they go through a mental health screening, and that screening sometimes isn't really set up to see, okay, who really has a problem and how we can really help them with that problem. It's set up as more of a security system. Okay, well, who has this problem that's gonna cause us problems? And it's not set up to really assess the problem, because if they really assess the problem and really see who has these mental health illnesses and who they have to really treat, then they're gonna be out of a lot of money. And again, they're making money off of us, not trying to spend money on us. So our mental health issues aren't being addressed when you enter into a prison system. I think half the people who come in on medication wind up not on medication. That medication costs money, so they're not being treated. The therapy services are not there like they should be. So basically, you wind up with more mental health problems. You wind up going through the stressors of incarceration, of being isolated in solitary confinement. You wind up going through just being away from your comfort system, your family, your friends, and all the other threats that are involved in the prison system. So that mental health problem just keeps going, and once you get out, that doesn't change. You may actually be in a state that's set up where it doesn't have Medicaid reform, so you're actually not able to get insurance, so you're not able to get your mental health medication, so you may commit another crime and wind up back in the system again because you just weren't thinking clearly because you aren't being treated. And I don't remember what your question was. I'm sorry. It was something about mental health.
You answered it.
We good. You'll follow us for years.
I thought you said services or something, but one program that I like, and I don't know who started or anything like that, but one that I like to call attention to is a program called Open Path Collective, because you can get a lot of counseling services from that program for a low cost. It's like $30 to $50 per session, which isn't cheap, but it's a lot cheaper than it normally would be. So you just kind of go online and fill out the questionnaire, and you can actually I prefer not to answer for a lot of questions if you like, and get those counseling services for like $30 a session.
So I think now we're going to go to questions from the audience, if anybody had any. Dave has the mic. Throw the hand in.
You.
I've got one question. Why are there no whites in this town?
Well, that's a question for Dave.
Want to know what? This wasn't about race. Well, this wasn't about race. Like, I didn't pick this panel based on the color. I picked it based on people that are doing work in the community. That's really what the panel's about.
But I'd be interested to know why is it relevant?
Yeah.
Why is that relevant? I'm just curious to know.
White people have all the power. What we are addressing here among ourselves is powerlessness.
Well,
We don't have the power to change any of the system.
One at a time. I heard a whole lot of wells.
Great statement.
I mean, you open up the floor for a great question, and that's the question that we must address with ourselves. It was a teacher that taught me that in our own community, we must solve our own problems. And we must have our own discussions about what goes on in our community. And nobody's gonna save black people but black people. And we got to become, in this day and time, I must say this we must say this to ourselves. One of my greatest supporters in the work that I do have been a white man, because he understood if I took care of my business in my neighborhood, I keep Ray Ray and Pook in my neighborhood, they wouldn't come to his. So what we have to do is the black community. We got our own dollars, we got our own doctors, we got our own lawyers, we got our own teachers. We got to come together again amongst each other to save ourselves. We know what he gonna do, because he gonna take care of his own. We must take care of our own in this day and time. And I'm thankful for the brother to bring the panel, for us to understand we make up 90% of the system, black and brown people. And we must become 100%, we become 100% of the problem to ourselves. We got to become 100% of the problem to solve our own problems. So I just want to say that. Thanks for asking that question. Because we have become our greatest enemy.
I also feel like we have to stop acting like we are powerless, because we're not. We have a long history of using our power to do good things, and somewhere along the lines we stopped. I mean, if we look at some of the advances in some of our history, just in civil rights, maybe like the Montgomery bus boycott, you know, people came together behind the cause and they hit people in their pockets. And we may not have a whole lot of money, but they want the money that we do have. So if we collectively stop giving them our money, then they start listening. So why we act like we don't have power is beyond me. And if we can do that today, and we had a little bit of a conversation earlier about that, talk about your people a little bit, but in the NFL, I just don't even understand at this point why we're still part of the NFL, why we're still supporting the NFL, while we're allowing them to make money off of us when we have great power within an organization like that. We have the majority of the talent. If we go somewhere else, they're going to follow us, because even if some other communities, some other peoples don't like us, they like to be entertained by us, and they're gonna follow us. If we go somewhere else, start our own NFL, put a little bit of money together, some of the players and people with a little bit of knowledge of that industry come together. We started the Big Three. There's no reason we can't start the NFL and stop giving dollars to people who are calling us prisoners and acting like we can't speak up when our people are dying. So I think that we have a lot of power. We just need to come together and start using it more effectively.
Are you asking about a racial divide? Is that what you're saying? I'm trying to understand exactly what you meant by starting our own league, because we own the majority of the talent.
No, it's not even about a racial divide. It's about just stop supporting something that is not respecting us. So if we start our own, where we're able to respect ourselves, and if anybody from any other racial or ethnic background decide to join in, that's perfectly fine. I'm just saying to stop feeding people with our money that aren't respecting us. If they can't respect us, then don't respect my green, because you're not getting that either. So.
But you know, 65% of the league is African American.
Exactly.
Millionaires that are benefiting from the league. I'm trying to understand. Me and my wife, we live on the north side of Houston, and I love your panel. And we want to know exactly what can we do to be a part, or to extend the message that you're delivering on our side of town. We're 1960 and champions.
Yeah, so I don't want to talk about the NFL, to be honest with you. I want to keep this about recidivism in the community. I appreciate your question though, and we can bring this to any community, just with you guys' help. Like we need help from the community to bring these things to the community. But we can talk about it afterwards for sure, Sam. I appreciate your support. But yeah, we'd love it. Like we'd love to, but we're gonna plant our foot in this community for now, because I don't want to, you know, but we will plant our foot here. But yeah, absolutely. Like I think it's necessary in our community, period. And I also want to say that I'm proud to have people that look just like me in these positions of power in our community. Like I want to say that. Like, I think that's important. I think kids need to see that. I didn't see that growing up. Like I need to look up there and see people that are in the DA's office that if I need to call, I have something going on in my family, I'm gonna reach out to Shakira. And maybe she can guide me because I may not have information. I can reach out to Officer Arnold and get some, it's important. It's important. It's important. We all know, like, it's important to have somebody that looks like you in these positions. So it's not about race, but it is about people that look like you, that are in these positions of power. So everybody up here is doing the work in the community, and I'm proud to have them on the panel. It's powerful. But if you guys, but I want to keep the questions around recidivism, the NFL, all that stuff is a whole nother debate. Because black people love the NFL.
Really
I
quickly,
don't support it, but you
Chris
guys
wanted
ask
to.
questions.
to chime in on something here.
I just want to add to the last answer that was added. I also think we need to stop depending on their institutions to solve our problems. We're sitting here and we have 19 African American women running for judge.
Yeah.
We have a black DA, someone from the DA's office here. But the answer that I'm not sure.
No, it's okay.
We're gonna speak it into it.
You're from the DA's office, right?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. That's good. I'm close enough. But the answer we heard when I asked them a question about low pleading standards causing people to be unjustly incarcerated without even knowing what they've been really charged with was, from the judge, it was, I can't really do anything about that. That's the attorney's job, right? That was the answer that we got. Now, she said, unless it's an egregious case, then she can step up. The DA's office, and not these people specifically, because it's the institutions that they're a part of, right? The district attorney's office essentially says, well, you know, for the things that Europeans are being lauded for as the next billionaires in other states, we're putting our little black folks who are walking around with marijuana in separate parts of the jail, right? We're carving out little spaces and we're taking things off their records, but they're still being incarcerated, right? So to the extent that we think that having more lawyers is going to solve, more black lawyers is going to solve our problem, it hasn't, right? We've got more lawyers than we ever had, more black lawyers than we ever had before, and there's more of us in jail than there ever has been before, right? To the extent that we think that, well, certainly having African American judges in office is important, right? But to the extent that we believe that that is the catch-all and the salvation for our problems, it isn't, right? I can read to you, I have an indictment, I just want to read it very quickly. And then I like your comment, and I like her comment on it. But this is an indictment of a gentleman who's been in jail for 6 months. It says, the duly organized grand jury of Harris County, Texas, presents in the District Court of Harris County, Texas, that in Harris County, Texas, I'll say his name, Arius Banks, hereinafter styled the defendant, heretofore on or about April 13, 2018, did then and there unlawfully, while in the course of committing theft of property owned by somebody, and with an intent to attain and maintain control of the property, intentionally and knowingly threaten and place somebody in fear of imminent bodily injury and death, and the defendant then and there use and exhibit a deadly weapon, namely a firearm. Now, that may sound official to you, but all it does is states a bunch of conclusions at law. We conclude that you robbed somebody. We conclude that you unlawfully displayed a weapon. We conclude that you took the property. We didn't say when. We said on or about the 13th. We didn't say what time. We didn't say what specific place. We didn't say what did you specifically take. So now, how am I supposed to stand up in front of a judge when they ask me that question, how do you plead, and say, well, how did I plead on where I was on or about April 13th, the 12th, the 13th, or the 14th? That I did is now me sitting at home playing a video game was somehow robbing Elena Morales, right? What am I supposed to do? Recidivism is about the fact that when you've been convicted of a crime, you are now shark bait. When a police officer pulls you over, right, and I wish you would have said, you know, I find out that you're in a stolen car. Because I wish you would have said I pulled you over because I saw that you were in a stolen car. Not I pulled you over and then found out you were in a stolen car. But that's, I understand. For whatever reason you pulled them over, and I'm not assuming that it was a negative reason.
It was though.
I believe it.
Yeah.
I believe you. I don't believe them all the time, but I believe you, right? But the fact is that these situations happen. When you are a convicted felon, when you've been charged with a crime, if they can look up and find your name in the system in any way, shape, or form, they feel justified. So then the next thing they do is they throw something on you, charge you with no facts, no real information, no time, place, thing you took, none of that. And then they put you in front of a judge. And the judge sits here and she looks at it, we'll say he. The judge looks at it and he says, okay, how do you plead? He doesn't ask, where did this happen? What time did it happen? What did you take? None of that stuff. He says, how do you plead? And you say, not guilty, because your attorney sitting there saying, say not guilty. Right? I had this young man here was in court. He's been there for 5 months, gets to see the judge the first time. He files in the court records that he wants the nature and cause. He wants you to tell him specifically what he took, what time he asked for that information specifically. The attorney comes into the courtroom, takes his mother to the side and said, don't you ever have your son file something like this again. You have no idea what you're doing or what you're talking about. Curses her out. He then goes into the back. Now the judge is on the bench. He then goes into the back, and you could hear him screaming at Arias Banks, saying, "Have you lost your effing mind? Don't you ever file anything in this case again. Don't you ever do, you don't know what you're talking about." He said, "Where'd you get this from?" He said, "I read the Constitution." You can hear him, he said, "I read the Constitution." He says, "You're lying to me. Nobody's read the Constitution, it's too damn long. And if you think I'm kidding, I'm not. I'm telling you that God's honest truth." He said, "It's too damn long. Nobody's ready, you don't know what you're doing." So then what did he do? He went in, he reset the case for next month. The 23rd of this month is now, it's coming up.
Okay.
Didn't go see the judge. Somehow, the motion that he filed for more information does not appear on the record, any place on the record file. But he had, that attorney had a filed stamp copy. So we have a systematic problem in the district attorney's office, in the system in which attorneys are appointed, because you say get a good attorney, they don't get to choose. Right? I don't save up money thinking I'm going to jail next week and I have to give it to somebody. Right? That's not what I do. So when I don't get to choose the person that I have, what am I to do? I have no representation. Now, I will tell you, there are people who are doing things right there in the back. Stand up, brother. Daryl Malone, the Tubman Project. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to advertise anything, but this is all about collective second chances. It's all about us working together. Daryl Malone is running a project called the Tubman Project. It's artificial intelligence used to give indigent defenders a course of action relative to filings. Right? Is that something that you guys would support, being in jails and allowing them to have access to that so they can check their defendants? Check their attorneys?
So I think that we can all identify, many of the flaws that exist within the criminal justice system. Because we're, obligated to work within a flawed system until we could really implement change from a systems vantage point. District Attorney Ogg was intentional in her efforts, right, to institute policies as soon as she was elected, right? So not waiting, not deferring. And for example, I know you mentioned, oh, well, this happened in this particular case, and this is happening. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of cases, and again, this is human error, right, apart from everything else. But apart from that, there's a grant from the MacArthur Foundation that Harris County received to study racial and ethnic disparities and how it impacts the criminal justice system. And it's data-driven, right? And so you receive those dollars, and you're supposed to collect data from the different policing agencies, including our agency, the District Attorney's Office. We have to submit our data. And again, this is the newly elected district attorney. We haven't had a progressive and or Democratic district attorney in over 20 years, right? So it's slow and steady. She's up against the institution as well, right? So of course, we'd like to see some things change, but there's process, there's protocol, there's people, right? There's resources in place, and we're beholden to a commissioner's court, which is predominantly Republican, predominantly male. There are challenges with resources. There are challenges with ensuring that each prosecutor has the time to really walk a case all the way through and to find out all facts needed to make an informed decision. And it's challenging. I'll give you an easy example. Last Thursday, we were at a public forum at Thurgood Marshall School of Law at TSU's campus, and a mom walks up to us and she says, "Look, my son's in jail. I called CERT, which is the crisis intervention team. He had schizophrenia. And they don't send out CERT, they dispatch a regular unit. And as a result, they were not skilled to handle an individual who's mentally challenged. And so he ends up going to jail. He's offered 4 years TDC. But again, when an officer calls, all you know is what that officer has said. That's all the intake division has to go off of. And you make an informed decision whether or not you accept that charge or not. Again, it's tough, right? It's completely objective. Again, it is the system that we are forced to work within. Apart from that, so I received the case. I received a letter from mom saying, "Hey, could you get this to the ADA? Who's handling the case?" And again, ADA's moved. So I find the ADA who's handling the case. We have a mental health bureau now. DA Ogg expanded those resources because she understood. We also have a recently opened mental health diversion facility, which is what I want to share earlier. So individuals here on the local level, because we all understand that the Harris County Jail is the largest public health facility, mental health facility in Harris County. So there are reforms, right, slow but steady, and it's very difficult to measure because they're just being implemented. But back to the story where we're able to take this case to the ADA and say, hey, CERT was supposed to be called out, however, CERT was not, this wasn't handled properly, what can we do? So we get back to mom, ADA says, look, we can get him in felony mental health court, he gets deferred, he's done. He's clearly mentally ill, mentally challenged. But again, if I didn't receive it, right, or if it wasn't brought to our attention, again, thousands and thousands and thousands of cases, it is a problem. severely understaffed, severely underfunded, right, for the job that needs to be done. And I think that all of those factors need to be taken into consideration when we're talking about how do we actually institute criminal justice reform. There are lots of reforms that I'm sure my boss and other individuals in the criminal justice community would like to institute, but you've got to think about the resources, you've got to think about the policies and practices, you also have to think about the state legislator, right, who mandates who gets what, when, where, and how. So this is a big civic engagement, civic participation lesson that stems far beyond individual cases.
Chief, you wanted to chime in?
Well, we have to go back to education. We got to go back to the house. We got to go back to the old way of doing things. If you teach your children at home, whatever you teach them, but in a positive way to respect somebody, we've gotten away from respecting God, family, and the police, okay? When I stopped that young man, those two young men in that vehicle, it wasn't by accident. I stopped those two young men because they made a major infraction and almost injured the life of an individual. That is not my job. I don't go around doing traffic patrol at this stage in my career. But it was a blessing that I stopped these two young men at the time that I did. When I stopped them, it was because of their response, and their reaction is why I treated them the way that they were treated. I didn't stop them with the intent to arrest either one of them. I stopped them to find out, why would you make such a turn in front of this vehicle? And yes, I did go at them pretty much in the same demeanor. You know, why would you make a turn like that? And it was their response that dictated my reaction. It wasn't mine. It was theirs. One young man, after he was detained in the vehicle, the first thing comes out of his mouth, because he's sitting on a gun, is, my mama's gonna kill me if she gets a chance. If I didn't kill you first, you're sitting on a gun. But he was an educated young man, and he was riding in the vehicle with his friend, who wasn't raised and reared the same way. So we got two different people doing the same thing. He simply said he was going to the store to get something to eat. Well, who has money? Nobody. How you gonna purchase the food? So it's simple. We have to go back to old school education. Again, I can remember when there would be a time that me and OG wouldn't be able to sit at the same table. So we're on the same team. And what I can't get out, I'm praying that he can get out.
I mean, you're so right, but we have to, in our community, we must come up to understand that we got a generation that we have produced that don't care about dying. The music have been hijacked, the church have been hijacked, and we dealing with a new generation of young people not gonna go along to get along. Somehow during the 70s and 80s, we forgot to teach our young men about the purpose of respect. So therefore, we have to, in our community right now, do anybody know that Houston Harris County is building a $70 million juvenile detention center for our young people? Because the one downtown has become so overcrowded? And until we be able to get back in our schools at that level, Brother Dave brought it up earlier, you know what I'm saying? At one of our middle schools, you know, at the middle schools where they have criminal records. You know, I would teach at a charter school, which it used to be in Houston called CEP, and most of our young people at the charter school are already being programmed because we in the community have lost connection with our children. We have more police in schools than counselors. When we're teaching our children that it's all right to be incarcerated, at CEP, the label that the children have put on the name of the charter school is called Children's Early Prison. So until we get actually involved back at the educational level and break the school to prison pipeline to know that if we don't get back in the family, which it's going to be hard to do because we understand that our children spend most of their day in these school systems that's already prejudged, especially black boys when they come in the room, that they're not willing to learn, and there's no purpose in putting energy in black boys to teach them. And that school to prison pipeline is set up to keep them incarcerated, because 70% of them, once they do a diagnosis, when they go to the juvenile probation department, come up with some form of mental illness, whether there's a slight form of mental illness or a severe form of mental illness. So we have to really engage and get into these school systems and reproduce a new family structure and how we gonna deal with this new population of young people that's not willing to bear down like our generation did.
More questions from the audience, do we have?
So we're gonna take a couple more. How many questions do we have? So you got you. We're gonna take a couple more because we gotta get to the film. I don't wanna cut you guys off. So make sure your questions, and panel, try to answer questions in like 30 seconds. Like you guys. It always gets like this, which is fine, but I wanna be mindful of people's time. This is good. We could talk about this all day, but it's about the work and about connecting the dots. So I'm gonna just work a few more questions.
So yeah, as mentioned, I work on something called the Tubman Project, which is working to build AI tools for criminal defense, indigent defense, things like that. Through that, I'm a software engineer by trade. The law is definitely not my specialty, but I have been, through this project, able to get a good look at various pieces of it. I tend to look at things from in a systemic matter, you know, thinking about debugging and things like that. And one of, I think, the biggest issues, and I'm not going to put any of you guys on the spot that are here in a, you know, official capacity or what have you, but the system is working as intended in a lot of ways. You know, there's funding that goes towards prosecution. There's funding that goes towards prisons. You know, there's not funding that goes towards us, you know, defense of the public in general, right? Regardless of all the rhetoric about, you know, the land of the free and whatever, that tends to be for a select few, whereas our community lives in a police state in a very real way, you know, regardless of, you know, and again, not trying to put anybody on the spot, but regardless of what you may think of police pulling over people for the right reasons and what have you, but 90% of the time, they're pulling over a certain demographic of person, you know what I mean? The money that comes into the system, you know, prisons get money that they are paid for keeping people imprisoned. Like, there's a financial incentive to put people into jail. You know, there's no financial incentive to keep people free. There's no price on freedom where people are making money off of it, you know? So, in that sense, and Houston is probably a little bit better in a lot of ways just because we are a diverse city and we are a city that has a lot of black wealth. There's a lot of people of color that have wealth in this community. So because of that, we do see some advantages, especially compared to different parts around the country. But even so, how would you operate if you know you have a system that is really designed and incentivized in a certain way, regardless of how much you may want to help? You know, there's not much you can do if everything is pushing you to hurt. You know, so how do you combat that?
Anybody?
It's a hard question. Like, I would say, I think you work with the resources and the express powers, you know, within your bailiwick, and I think that that's what my boss does daily. As it pertains to racial and ethnic disparity in the criminal justice system, we know it exists. We know who is standing outside in line in front of the criminal courthouse, right, daily. We know what the actual cultural makeup is, right? As it pertains to the legislator and prison privatization, right? We've got things happening around us, again, that are quite frankly out of our control, but what can we do in the meantime? We can be intentional in our efforts. So there's thousands of people who would have been in jail right now for marijuana who are not, right? There are thousands of people who would have been in jail for low-level nonviolent offenses, which will likely lead to other, you know, heavier offenses later on that are not. We're currently working to reform the juvenile justice system, which is very difficult. And prior to, and OG's correct, they are building a new facility, and that's because there was one man, Tom Brooks, who was the head of juvenile probation, who decided that was his last deal before he left, that he was going to make sure that facility happened. And he did. There was a major fight in the Texas legislature regarding raising the age of criminal responsibility for juveniles. What my boss is doing right now is reducing the number of referrals from the ISDs, right? So we've convened the area ISD PDs to tell them, look, you guys have got to identify more creative and meaningful ways to discipline kids inside of the school instead of creating criminals and sending them to the district attorney's office or sending them directly to us. So I think that that type of proactivity does go a long way, right? And it does reduce the number of individuals who would have had a negative impact or experience with the criminal justice system at a very, very young age. There are also several groups, Texas Appleseed, Texas Criminal Justice Coalition, Texas Organizing Project, the entire Right to Justice group, who's working daily, right? Working daily, and you can ask any of them. We are nothing, I don't know, I heard that, Sonia, we are nothing more than willing participants in helping them in every way that we can. We also convene the area superintendents to tell them, hey, we've met with your ISDPDs, now we're meeting with you, right, to let you know that you guys have got to figure out how to deal with children, right, and not send them and criminalize their every move and sending them to jail. And so there's several things that are happening around us that a lot of times people don't know about. Right, we either haven't read or we just don't have time to stop and really do the research, but it's happening. That Racial Equity Disparity Grant from the MacArthur Foundation is $2.7 million, and it's all about the system's vantage point and creating meaningful policies based upon the data that we know exists. So we're willing participants, so is HPD, so is the Sheriff's Office, and so is some of the area constables who also still patrol in our communities through contracts. And so we've got to think about, and we know that policing practices, again, are not fair in some communities, and that the data, right, has demonstrated that, and the grant was received because they know that this is what's happening in Harris County. And so we're working, and we're at the end of the grant, and the grant is up for renewal, again, for another 2 years, right, to move the policy initiatives forward. Again, and it's tough because this is a macro level vantage point. So for that information to permeate to the community, you got to build out a division. There was not a public engagement division at the district attorney's office prior to my boss. There was not whatsoever. There was no way. Community, you would just reach out, you'd send jail mail, you'd send an email. If somebody responds to you, they do. But since we've been in office, we've responded to just about everybody who sent us an email, wrote us a letter, anything. It's documented, right? When we reached out, back out to someone or they reached out to us, it's there. And so that accountability, I think, goes a long way as well. And it just hasn't been there, particularly for communities of color, right? We oftentimes feel like we aren't heard in this process. In order for these reforms to take place and to work, I think it's about the collective, and it's going to take some give and take and for folks to really, really be engaged consistently.
Raymond, did you have something?
Not into what I want to say, because I know he's going to only give us a little more time, but I want to also see the system. We talk about mental health, and some of these attorneys need to participate in the mental health process as well. But women, I mean, I've seen so many that they have children, they come out, they go to a prison, or they get out and they don't have tampons, they don't have soap, shampoo, or just the children. The women, it's a man's world in prison, for real, seriously. And so some of the things that we're talking about, definitely we need it for our brothers, our men, but even more so for the women, because they get less time for calls, they get less commissary, they have way more commissary needs. It's just a lot, and then once they get out, the resources are less. They have to go to a co-ed transitional halfway house, and they're very small transitional limit of living for women, very little. And so we'd like to see more programs addressed around that as well.
You're right, brother. Michelle Alexander, the new Jim Crow. The sister did an excellent job in putting down the new platform that we have to get out that old 18th century way of thinking. You can't lock a man up for 20 years, let him go with $50, and then have babies that he left out here, and then you charge him, you get him a minimum wage job. On the minimum wage job, you take 40% of that money and tell him to make it out here in this world out here. So until we go back and break down this whole system, because we understand it's working just like it's supposed to work, to keep people going back. 9 out of 10 people that get out to go back within a 2 to 3 year period. They know what they're doing. So until we in our community break this system, we are the taxpayers that keeps that system going. We got to start redirecting tax dollars to where we want it to go and work for us. You know what I'm saying? I tell people all the time, I was the community liaison in this community here, working with this community, Sunnyside, 3rd Ward, South Ward. We have 286 churches within a 6-mile radius in this district here. And on any given Sunday, they take black dollars and put it in a bank that loan money to people to re-gentrify our community. We got to get on a different trip.
Were there any other audience questions?
I'd like to say, may the Most High and the ancestors bless the panel and the people in this room. One thing I gotta say is, I'm originally from New York. I came to Texas. My family from Honduras, so my family's fresh off the coconut boat. But their dream was to come to America to give me a dream and live out that American dream for people after me and the ones after that. It's sort of like a statement / question. We have to fix the justice system. Number one, I learned when I was in the courtroom that even though I did probation, community service, parole, time, and I sealed my criminal history, they still could go back and judge me and enhance my case due to my priors, even though I done paid my dues to society. Number one, that's real bad. I understand that the judges, police officers, doctors, lawyers, etc., all these entities took an oath and an affirmation to uphold the Bill of Rights or the Constitution. But now I learned that these people break their own rules. You got coercion, you got fraud, you got a whole lot of things that's being committed in this justice system due to oppress people of my color or my descent or people that's close to it. I feel that that's not right. That's something that we should work on besides focusing on the financial part. Because my thing is, if we could fix this, because it's a broken system, like we've been saying throughout the whole course, is designed this way to keep us down. But if we could fix this, we could stop and minimize most of the problems. I have 3 kids. My oldest son, he's doing okay, by the grace of God. I have 2 baby boys that's coming up. And I'm trying my best right now to do better so this way they can have, and they don't have to experience the criminal life or the street life that's being advertised through these songs, videos, and etc. So I want to know, what can we do as brothers and sisters within the community that's outstanding members to fix this problem and to help the babies, because the babies is being targeted, not just us alone as adults.
And you, my friend, have asked the question that I wanted us to be able to end on from each person. Because at the end of the day, we don't want this to just, we don't want to walk out of here feeling helpless, right, and hopeless. And we all know that it is a multifaceted issue. And we can't change all of these pieces today. You were talking about it being a slow-moving process, but we do all have a responsibility in our own world, in our own circle. So from each person up here, whether it's just things that have helped you, or whether it's just things that you all have gathered in the course of your life, what is one thing that you feel like people can leave here and do to try to help move forward, at least move the needle a little bit?
Well, I'm going to ask mine on a personal level. I think these guys are going to be able to answer more clearly. But to help me was individuals that gave me an opportunity to grow my business, to have faith in me. Because the biggest thing, one of the things that was a challenge for me was jobs, was finding a home, and my reputation. So giving me an opportunity to branch out and grow my business. My apartment complex saying, look, we're going to go ahead and let you move in on July 1st. Those opportunities just kept pushing and pushing, and don't give up. If you feel like you want to, you just got to keep going to the answer's yes.
I would say, well, 2 things. One is we saw today some differences of opinions, and obviously we're going to have those. And I think a big thing in our community is to come together and work together even when there's differences of opinion, because that's when we are able to really advance, is when we unify despite those differences. And 2, I would say take responsibility, because as we said earlier, we do have some power and we do have to take responsibility for what we can do. And part of that is learning the system that we unfortunately have to deal with. So I think Dave has some resources that an attorney, criminal defense attorney, gave us just about understanding your rights and knowing how to deal with some police encounters, to minimize the issues that you do have and to hopefully go home alive and minimize the problems that you have through the system. So learning the system and also finding the resources that are out there, because it does seem like there are minimal resources, but we do have to take the role of actually looking up and searching for those resources, because there are actually some there and you have to take advantage of the ones that are there.
I would say the biggest thing we can do is understand the difference between a country and a nation. A country is within a geographical boundary. A nation of people who share a common history, culture, experiences, right? We share a common history, culture, and experiences. When you begin to accept that we are a nation within a country, you begin to realize that you are responsible for your brothers and your sisters. I am just as accountable for all those cats down in Harris County Jail as they are. Every time I don't decide to work with somebody from my community, somebody from my nation, right? I'm taking resources out of them and giving it to somebody else. So when we begin to look at ourselves in that sense, we understand that second chances is an obligation that we have to bear the burden of providing. So when you tell me that sisters need this or they need that, when they need housing, when they need those type of things, we have to set up economic motivation in our communities to go out and develop those things specifically for them, not for profit, not for transactional motivations, but in order to serve the needs of our nation.
I think that one takeaway is that going back. I think that information is power, and it's key in this process to understanding how it works, the flow of resources, who's responsible for what, when, where, and how. That's powerful. A lot of times people engage with the process and they don't understand, right, how they're being impacted by it. I would push for more civic education, more civic participation, and you going into your respective peer groups with your family and your friends, teaching them how the system works, and not just the courts, right? Who's my local city council member? Who's my state senator? Who's my state representative, right? Who's my mayor? What are they responsible for? What are they responsible for? How do they collaborate? How do they coordinate as a collective for the greater good of the community? And where do I fit, right, in the grand scheme of these things? And what are my expectations of the leadership that I vote for? Voting is important. Showing up is equally important. I can't tell you how many people's fates are decided by people who sit on juries that do not look like them, because we are not participating in juries. We are not going. If you hear friends say, I don't want to go to jury duty, no, encourage them to go, right? It could mean the difference between somebody spending the rest of their life in jail, right? So we've got to unwrap our minds around just, yeah, we'll leisurely engage. No, you've got to be committed and consistent and realize, again, it's not a sprint, it is a marathon. I started on a grassroots level, right from Texas Southern University, from the Barbara Jordan McAllister School of Public Affairs, was a White House intern, had the opportunity to organize, and was the youngest person to transition into the administration under DA Ogg at 28 years old. And so you can do whatever you want to do, but we cannot, not be, informed about something that impacts our daily lives every day.
The brother that answered that question, how did you find out about this place today? How did you find out about this place today?
Oh, you and the other brother.
Wait a minute. Now, how long you been out of jail, bro? I don't mean to put you, but this is about
6 or 7 days now.
Yeah, 6, 7 days. Now, you've been out about 6, 7. You've been out about 6, 7 days. When you called me and I told you about this place, that what was going on, and that I would be there for you to walk you through it, to find out people that love us can lead us in a different direction. And I brought somebody with me because I knew how important it is. And I did this not because of me, I did that because I love you. And until we figure out how to love each other again, ain't none of this going to work.
If you want to be different, you have to do different. We have to educate, communicate, and motivate each other. Doesn't matter what color you wear, what uniform you wear, where's the blue for police or the orange prisoners gear. If we don't get together and educate each other and discuss what is and what needs to be, then we're still standing still. So my encouragement to everybody, if you have a question, ask. If you don't know, listen, and let's learn together to make a difference for each other.
I think on that note,
Yeah, give them a hand, another hand. Any questions? Come on, who's got the mic?
To the young man there
Oh,
that
you got
just
it.
spoke, I heard you just been recently released. If you're looking for employment, I would use the Launchpad. We assist individuals with barriers, with employment. We put you in training, we'll give you a skill trade, and get you back to work. We have an NCER certification class in construction. All this construction you see going around Houston, we network and partner with them, so there will be job placement afterwards. There's no cost to you. You have small children, that's your only eligibility requirement. Please give me a call on Monday.
That's what I'm talking about.
So this is the purpose, to be honest with you. Like, that's the purpose. Like, we all have something to give. Like, find a way to give it. And I appreciate you so much. Like, that's, yeah, it is what we do. Like, this is, yeah. And that's what this whole program is about. Like, we want to bring these resources to the community. And my ask of the people that were here that were participating is to bring something to give. Like, bring something to give. Like, if it's a job, if it's an opportunity, if it's your talent, if it's your gifts, bring something to give. And I appreciate the questions. I appreciate you guys participating. All this stuff is real. And everything starts from a conversation, but it can't end there. Like, we have to stay active. We got to stay vigilant in the things that we're doing, because I believe the same thing that OG1 believes, and I'm sure everybody else on this panel believes, that we have to save ourselves. Like, anybody that follows me, that's like my motto. I'm like, we have to save ourselves, and we can't wait on somebody else to save us. And so fostering community engagement is huge. Like, that's what today is about. Like, I hope each and every person that's here today takes something, not just from this panel, but be inspired by all the things that you guys see, like all the community things that are going on, and people that look just like you that are in these positions, that are willing to help. So there's a lot of powerful things going on. I'm proud to be a part of it. Like, I'm overwhelmed. Like, this we've worked on this for some months now, and the turnout has been great. The support is great, and I appreciate everybody. My mom is here. She came all the way down from Terrell. That's my nephew. We're going to take about a 5-minute break, and then the film is next, is Second Chances. It's an award-winning film that I produced and directed. It's my first one, but I worked in entertainment the last 10 years of my life. I spent that in LA, and I decided that wasn't my purpose. That was just my passion. That was something I enjoyed, but it wasn't my purpose. And when Trayvon Martin got killed and all this kind of stuff, like all these little young black boys kept being killed, and for some reason it just never left me. Like, I could not figure out why I was so angry and why it would just never leave me. And so my only way to redirect this was to start Second Chances and to find a creative outlet to share this with people, because I think most people are visual learners. And a lot of people don't really know much about what it's like to be in the criminal justice system. Like, if you haven't been in there, even if you talk to somebody, it's not the same as having that experience. Like, I can ask questions all day, I can interview people all day, but I really don't know. And I'm speaking personally because I haven't been. I've been to jail. Mama probably. God. Yeah, I've been a couple times.
she's staying real quiet.
She writing it down. But it didn't ruin my life. I'm standing here today because it didn't ruin my life. So I'm privileged because of that, to be a young black man in my 30s and to not have a criminal record. I'm a, but I've done some stuff that could have gotten me there. And we all have, so we're all one mistake away from having our lives ruined if we do something like that. So that's what this film is about. The film was shot in Terrell, Texas. That's where I grew up at. And it's inspired by my family. My nephew's here. I didn't say lost, but my brother got caught up in the criminal justice system at the age of 15 here in Texas. And he was defending my mom, which that would have been me if I was that age. And he ended up being sent away and sentenced at that age. They also sentenced my mom. And so at that point, I didn't realize till I got older how that had impacted my life and how that affected me. My brother was my father figure. And I just didn't realize how it impacted my life and how it affected my mom. And at the time, my nephew wasn't even a year old. So my brother, here he is, he's 15, he's got a baby, and he's going away to juvie, and then from juvie to jail. So that whole thing, and my brother's a good dude, he's a good kid. But he's now, because of the way the system's set up, I don't know if institutionalized is the right word, but it's just hard to move forward. And so my brother's just one of many stories. Like I have several of my loved ones that are in the system, part of the system, and got caught up in it at a young age. And when you're in these little small towns like Terrell, Texas, that's all they do. And the thing that I want to do is empower people. Like, we don't have to accept anything. Like, I don't have to accept anything. And I want to empower my nieces and my nephews and my family and everybody around me. It's like, that's not the norm. Like, that's not the norm. That shouldn't be the norm. And so we have to find a way to fight this system. And this is another thing I say, is to be black means I always have to fight. I don't care what level you're in your career and in life, but you always have to fight. And as soon as you stop doing that, it's over. So I hope you guys enjoy the film. I'm waiting on one of the guys to come, but we're gonna clear this stuff up. You guys, I don't know if the food truck's still out, but you guys get a back in the break. Get back in 5 minutes.